She was just a quiet girl sitting in seat 16A, staring out the window as the clouds drifted by, her forehead lightly resting against the cool glass while the soft hum of the engines created a gentle rhythm that felt almost like a lullaby. The flight was calm, ordinary, and no one expected anything unusual to happen in the peaceful blue sky, least of all her, as she watched endless layers of white float beneath the wings like a frozen ocean. She had always loved this part of flying, the strange stillness of being suspended between earth and sky, where time felt slower and the world below seemed far away and unimportant. Her fingers curled loosely around the edge of her sweater as she breathed in the recycled cabin air mixed with faint traces of coffee and perfume, a familiar scent that reminded her of countless other journeys that had passed without incident or memory. She wasn't traveling for adventure or excitement. This was not a grand escape or a life-changing trip. It was simple, almost forgettable, just another flight added to the quiet collection of moments that made up her ordinary life. In her lap rested a worn paperback book she hadn't opened since takeoff, its pages untouched as her mind wandered somewhere between daydreams and distant memories. Her thoughts floated lazily from childhood afternoons to the sound of rain tapping against her bedroom window, to the soft echo of laughter she barely remembered from people who once mattered more than they did now. There was comfort in the monotony, in the predictability of it all, and she found herself strangely at peace in that small pocket of silence nobody else seemed to notice. Around her, the cabin moved in a slow choreography of routine. A flight attendant pushed a cart down the aisle, offering drinks with a polite smile that never quite reached her eyes. A man across the aisle adjusted his seatbelt and cleared his throat, his attention glued to the small screen in front of him. Somewhere behind, a child whispered questions to a tired parent, their voice hushed as if to respect the stillness of the moment. Everything felt wrapped in a gentle calm, the kind that made you forget where you were going and question whether you truly needed to arrive anywhere at all. She pressed her gaze further into the horizon, watching sunlight dissolve into the soft cotton of the clouds. The sky held a pale shade of blue, so vast and endless that it almost felt unreal, like an abstract painting stretched across infinity. There was something reassuring about it, something quietly powerful, as though the heavens themselves were holding the plane in a careful embrace. She felt small in the best possible way, insignificant yet safe, held in a space where nothing could reach her and nothing was demanded of her. Her phone rested silently on the tray table, screen dark, missed notifications irrelevant. For once, there was no pressure to respond, to explain, to be anything other than what she was in this moment. Just a girl in seat 16A, breathing in and out, watching the world drift by at a speed too great to comprehend. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the gentle vibration of the aircraft settle into her bones, a steady reminder that life was still moving forward even when she felt suspended between yesterday and tomorrow. When she opened them again, the same serene view greeted her, unbroken and smooth. The clouds rolled and folded into one another like living sculptures, endlessly reshaping and reforming. She imagined what it would feel like to walk on them, to sink into their softness and disappear into the quiet white. A faint smile curved her lips at the absurdity of the thought, but she didn't wipe it away. It felt good to imagine impossible things, to let curiosity drift without boundaries for just a little while. A distant memory surfaced, one from her childhood when she would lie on the grass and trace imaginary shapes in the sky, pretending the passing clouds were ships, castles, or wings of giant birds. Back then, the world had felt full of mystery and promise. Somewhere along the way, responsibilities had chipped away at that sense of wonder, leaving behind routines and expectations that shaped her into someone predictable and safe. Yet in this quiet moment above the earth, a small fragment of that forgotten magic returned, soft and fragile but undeniably present. She adjusted her posture slightly, tucking her legs in for comfort, and allowed herself to simply observe. The wing of the aircraft stood firm and steady, slicing through the air with ease, its metal surface catching flashes of sunlight like scattered diamonds. Everything about this journey spoke of normalcy, of an uneventful passage from one place to another, and she embraced that certainty without hesitation. There was safety in knowing nothing would change, that nothing extraordinary would disrupt the gentle rhythm of this flight. Time moved differently here, measured not by seconds or minutes but by the slow shifting of light and the gradual drift of cloud formations. Her breathing matched the steady tempo of the engines, and her heartbeat echoed that quiet consistency. For a brief while, she forgot about unfinished tasks, unresolved conversations, and the quiet ache of unanswered questions waiting for her back on the ground. Up here, they couldn't touch her. Up here, everything felt distant and strangely unimportant. She leaned back, letting her head rest fully against the seat, her eyes still wandering over the endless blue. The world felt suspended, as though this moment might stretch forever, an infinite pause between chapters of her life. There was beauty in that pause, in the silent agreement between machine and sky, between motion and stillness. It was a feeling she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge, yet it settled over her now like a warm blanket, comforting and light. If anyone had told her that this ordinary moment would soon transform into something unforgettable, she would have laughed quietly and turned her eyes back to the clouds. She had no reason to expect surprises, no hint of the extraordinary lurking just beyond her peaceful gaze. To her, this was simply another quiet passage through the heavens, another page in a life written softly, without spectacle or drama. And so she continued to stare out the window, lost in the subtle poetry of the sky, unaware that the calm, ordinary flight she sat upon was about to become a moment etched permanently into memory, a story born not of chaos but of wonder, beginning here in the stillness, high above the sleeping world below. As she leaned closer to the glass, her breath froze, the warmth of the cabin suddenly forgotten as a cold ripple of disbelief traveled through her chest, because there, suspended in the endless blue like a dream sketched by the horizon itself, an F-35 fighter jet was flying beside the passenger plane, perfectly matched in speed, and the surreal precision of its movement made her question reality for a brief, trembling second, the roar muted by thick insulation yet somehow felt in the quiet tremor of her fingertips resting against the window, and as the jet edged nearer, the smooth angular lines of its stealth body reflecting shards of sunlight, she could see the pilot turn slightly, his helmet tilting with deliberate grace, and through the tinted visor, despite the layers of protective glass and engineered distance, she saw a clear, confident salute meant only for her, a gesture so intimate and impossible that it stole every breath from her lungs and filled the space with a silence louder than any engine could ever create, while memories she never knew she carried flooded her mind like soft waves against a forgotten shore, memories of childhood dreams of flying, of paper planes launched from balconies, of nights spent staring at the sky and wondering what it would feel like to be seen by someone who existed beyond the ordinary, and in that frozen moment, with clouds rolling beneath like endless oceans of cotton and the sun painting gold along the wing's edge, she felt as if the entire world had narrowed into a single sacred point of connection between two strangers suspended above the earth, her reflection faintly merging with the sharp silhouette of the fighter jet as if their realities had briefly overlapped, and her heart pounded not with fear but with an overwhelming sense of wonder, as though this salute carried a story she did not yet understand, a silent message that pierced through the routine monotony of travel and touched some fragile, sacred part of her soul that had long waited for confirmation that extraordinary moments still existed in a predictable world. And as the pilot held the salute for just a second longer than necessary, she imagined the life behind that visor, the discipline, the skies he had crossed, the storms he had outrun, and the quiet moments he must have spent gazing toward the same sun now illuminating them both, and she wondered why, out of all the passengers on this flight, out of all the countless faces hidden behind windows and veils of anonymity, his salute had been directed at her, a silent acknowledgement that felt strangely familiar, as if their paths had been meant to intersect in this impossible sliver of time. And though the logical part of her mind tried to explain it away as coincidence or protocol or mere spectacle, her heart refused to believe such a moment could be so ordinary. She felt chosen in a way she had never felt before, not chosen for grandeur or fame, but chosen for a fleeting piece of shared humanity above the clouds where titles and labels dissolved into nothingness, and as fellow passengers gasped and whispered behind her, their voices distant echoes in a tunnel of astonishment, she did not turn to share the moment, because it belonged to her alone, cradled between her pulse and the steady rhythm of the sky, and she held her gaze steady, unwilling to let the connection break, watching the subtle shift of the jet's wings as it adjusted to invisible air currents, its presence both powerful and strangely gentle, like a guardian of the heavens momentarily stepping into her quiet life, and for once she felt truly seen, not as a blur in a crowded airport or a fleeting passerby in a restless city, but as a singular soul acknowledged in the vastness of the atmosphere, and in that instant her fears, her unanswered questions, her small private disappointments seemed to dissolve, replaced by a profound stillness that wrapped around her like an invisible embrace, and the world below, with all its noise and urgency, felt impossibly distant, as if she had crossed into a realm where time softened and meanings deepened, and she realized that sometimes life does not change with grand announcements or loud declarations but with a quiet salute in the sky, a simple gesture that reminds you that even in the most routine of journeys, magic can find you when you least expect it. And as the pilot slowly lowered his hand and the jet began to drift just slightly away, still parallel yet already retreating into its own destiny, she felt a pang of bittersweet longing, like the end of a beautiful dream she wished could linger just a moment longer, but instead of sadness there was gratitude, a deep, unspoken thankfulness for having witnessed something so rare, so pure, so surreal that it etched itself into her memory with permanent clarity. And even as the fighter jet merged into the distance and became a single shimmering point against the bright endless sky, the echo of that salute remained alive within her, a quiet reminder that for one breathtaking moment at 30,000 feet, she was not just a girl in seat 16A, she was the center of a silent story written between wings and clouds, between courage and curiosity, between earth and infinity, and that story would forever whisper to her whenever life felt ordinary, reminding her that wonder is real and that sometimes, far above the world, a single glance can change the rhythm of a heart forever. Her heart raced as passengers noticed the moment and whispered in amazement, a ripple of astonishment moving through the cabin like a living current, each person frozen between disbelief and awe, their heads turning, eyes wide, mouths half open in silent exclamations that somehow felt too small to capture the enormity of what was happening outside the window. While phones were raised and cameras clicked, flashes of technology attempting to trap a moment that seemed almost sacred, yet no image could truly convey the raw intensity of the scene, the surreal perfection of the F-35 gliding beside the plane, its polished angular body catching the sunlight and reflecting it in dazzling shards, and though the crowd reacted, she remained still, rooted to her seat, feeling as if time itself had paused just for this impossible scene in the sky, the world around her dissolving into a blur of murmurs and mechanical hums, leaving only the electric connection between her gaze and the pilot's salute, a silent acknowledgement that penetrated far beyond the ordinary constraints of space and distance. And as the minutes stretched in an elastic loop of wonder, she felt a mix of exhilaration and disbelief, a tingling thrill that raced down her spine and fluttered in her stomach, the kind that comes once in a lifetime, a moment suspended between reality and dream, a secret only she truly understood, a memory that would forever live inside her, vivid and untouchable, an affirmation that even in the most ordinary journey, the extraordinary could arrive unannounced, turning the sky into a stage and her life into a story she would never forget, the clouds rolling beneath like soft oceans of white, infinite and serene, their gentle curves reflecting the fading sunlight, painting the wing in gold and silver, while the subtle hum of the engines provided a strange, rhythmic backdrop to the breathtaking choreography of the fighter jet beside them. And with each passing second, she noticed the precision of its movement, the way it mirrored the plane almost perfectly, a silent conversation between two machines and one human witness, each adjustment in the jet's position deliberate, controlled, graceful, as though the pilot was performing for her alone, a performance unseen by most, yet seared into her mind with clarity sharper than any photograph could hold. And as she continued to watch, the world inside the cabin seemed to shrink, narrowing down to her seat in the window frame, to the glinting metal of the jet and the unmistakable gesture of the salute, each detail magnified in her awareness, from the subtle tilt of the pilot's helmet to the gleaming reflection of sunlight on his visor, the precise angle of the wings, the small puff of air displaced by the jet as it cut through the sky, a ballet of mechanics and human skill. And she felt herself leaning closer, pressing her hands to the glass as if she could bridge the gap between her ordinary existence and the extraordinary life unfolding beside them, imagining the pilot's perspective, the hours spent in training, the endless skies traversed, the calm focus required to perform such a maneuver with unflinching precision, and she marveled at the courage it took to move so fearlessly through the heavens, knowing that this gesture, so small in scale, yet monumental in meaning, was a gift of connection, a silent acknowledgement that transcended words, a moment where two very different worlds intersected for an instant, and in that intersection, she felt seen, recognized, acknowledged in a way that reached beyond the physical, into the quiet chambers of her own longing and dreams. And as the jet held the salute just long enough for her heart to absorb the weight of it, she noticed the subtle motions of the other passengers, some still staring, mouths agape, some whispering frantic words to each other, some shaking their heads in disbelief, but she felt untouched by the collective awe, insulated in her own bubble of wonder, and she realized that this was a private miracle, a fleeting yet permanent engraving on the canvas of her memory, the kind of moment that would surface in quiet times years later, a reminder that life occasionally bends reality to gift someone with pure, unanticipated magic. And as the pilot slowly lowered his hand and the jet began to drift, gradually pulling away, a pang of longing gripped her, a mixture of sadness that the spectacle was ending and gratitude that it had existed at all. And she knew that no matter how ordinary her life became after this flight, this precise instance, the salute, the alignment of speed, sky, and human acknowledgement, would remain vivid, untouchable, immortal in her mind, a jewel of experience that no one could take away. And even as the jet became a speck on the horizon, merging with the endless expanse of blue, the echo of the salute remained, reverberating in her chest, a quiet, continuous rhythm that reminded her that extraordinary moments could arrive unbidden, that wonder exists even in the mundane, and that sometimes, all it takes is a glance, a gesture, a brief acknowledgement to transform the ordinary into the unforgettable. And as she finally leaned back, allowing her hands to leave the cool window, her pulse still racing and her mind still spinning with the impossible, she felt a serene understanding settle over her, that life is made of such moments, rare and precious, that mark the soul, that whisper in the quiet and tell you that, against the vast indifference of the universe, someone, somewhere, sees you, recognizes you, and in some small, miraculous way, honors your existence. And she smiled softly, knowing that the memory of this sky, this jet, this salute, would be hers forever, a treasure of the spirit, a story she would tell herself over and over, each retelling bringing back the shiver of awe, the flush of exhilaration, the clarity of a moment when the impossible touched her life and made her feel, more than anything else, alive in the truest sense, as if the universe had paused just to give her this singular experience, an intimate connection in the vastness of the sky that no camera, no recording, no word could ever capture fully, a reminder that some moments are meant only to be felt and carried within, and that even amidst the routine, the ordinary, the predictable, life could still surprise with beauty so precise, so fleeting, that it imprints itself indelibly upon the soul, transforming an otherwise ordinary flight into a story she would carry for the rest of her life, a story of awe, of recognition, of the quiet magic that exists when worlds align, when a single gesture, a salute, a shared glance, can alter the way one experiences the entire universe. And she knew that every time she looked at the sky again, no matter where she was, her heart would remember that pulse, that shiver, that breathtaking realization that she had been seen in a way that transcended logic, that defied expectation, that elevated her from a simple passenger in seat 16A to a witness of a miracle, and that memory, vibrant and eternal, would forever remind her that the extraordinary is never as far away as it seems, that it exists in quiet, sudden, unannounced moments, waiting for someone to notice, to feel, to be transformed. And she felt a deep, abiding gratitude for the gift of having witnessed it, for the fleeting intimacy shared with a stranger in the sky, for the affirmation that life can still astonish, elevate, and honor the human spirit in ways no one can predict, that sometimes the world itself bends to offer a single, perfect moment of wonder. And she knew that this moment, this salute, this impossible scene frozen in time, would live inside her forever, a living pulse of awe and possibility that would outlast every ordinary day to come, a reminder that the world, at its most miraculous, is waiting, always waiting, to take your breath away, if only you were watching. And that was exactly what she had done, with her heart wide open, her soul alert, and her eyes fixed on the impossible beauty of a pilot's salute, perfectly aligned with the endless sky. When the jet finally pulled away and disappeared into the endless blue, she sat back with a soft smile, the hum of the airplane settling into a comforting rhythm around her. The sensation of the clouds slipping past her window, endless and vast, filled her with a strange, quiet exhilaration that was hard to put into words. She traced her finger along the condensation, forming tiny trails on the glass, each one a miniature river that twisted and curved like the intricate patterns of her own thoughts. Her heart still raced, but not from fear. It was from the thrill of something entirely unexpected, something that had briefly broken the monotony of her ordinary life. She had been just another passenger, one among hundreds, yet in that brief, fleeting moment, the sky itself had seemed to recognize her, had acknowledged her existence with a gesture so simple, yet so profound, that it would stay with her forever. She thought back to the seconds before the jet appeared, how ordinary the flight had seemed. The engines had been a constant drone, punctuated by the occasional murmur of passengers, the soft thrum of life inside a metal tube suspended high above the earth. She had glanced around her seat, noting the tired faces, the people hunched over books or screens, earbuds in, lost in their own worlds. A man across the aisle had been dozing, his head tilted awkwardly, and a mother a few rows ahead had been trying to calm a restless child, offering snacks and small toys, coaxing giggles out of a little body that was more energy than fatigue. She herself had been staring out the window, her thoughts wandering in a lazy meander, a mixture of anticipation for her destination and introspection about the life she had left behind on the ground. She had not expected anything remarkable, not a single extraordinary thing, to punctuate this ordinary journey. And yet, the universe had a way of sneaking in surprises when least expected. Then the F-35 appeared. It had not emerged suddenly like a bolt of lightning, but rather slid into view with a precision that seemed almost choreographed. The sunlight glinted off its sleek metal frame, catching her eye in a way that made her blink and look again, unsure if what she saw was real. There it was, flying beside the commercial plane, close enough to make her heart skip a beat, yet distant enough to remain untouchable, a creature of the sky that belonged to an entirely different realm. She could see the pilot's silhouette through the cockpit glass, and when he raised his hand in a salute, a shiver ran down her spine, a mix of awe, disbelief, and a sudden, inexplicable joy. The salute was brief, a single, fluid motion, but it carried with it a weight of significance she couldn't immediately articulate. It was not just a greeting, it was acknowledgement, a connection forged in silence at 30,000 feet above the earth. Time seemed to stretch in those moments. The roar of the engines, the distant chatter of passengers, the very air inside the cabin, all faded into insignificance as she held her gaze on that small figure in the cockpit. She imagined the skill it must have taken to maneuver the fighter jet so close to a commercial airliner, the precision required to maintain such balance, the calmness necessary to execute a salute with perfect timing. It struck her then how much courage existed in the world, often unnoticed by most but powerful in its quiet presence. She wondered what it was like to live a life so intertwined with mastery and control over such a dangerous, awe-inspiring machine, and for a fleeting second, she envied that freedom, the ability to fly not just physically, but metaphorically, unbound by routine or gravity. The moment lasted only seconds, though it felt much longer in her mind. The jet shifted slightly, banking away with fluid grace, and then it was gone, dissolving into the endless expanse of blue. She blinked, half expecting it to reappear, half hoping it would not, knowing that some magic is more profound precisely because it is fleeting. The silence that followed was almost sacred. Around her, the airplane continued its course as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. A stewardess passed by, asking if anyone needed anything, and passengers adjusted their seats or scrolled through devices, unaware of the tiny miracle that had just brushed against their reality. She felt almost guilty for having experienced something so beautiful and secret, a private moment of wonder that belonged solely to her. Her fingers traced the windowpane again, but the condensation had shifted, leaving no sign of the previous patterns. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly, an ocean of blue and white, each cloud sculpted into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, as if nature herself had conspired to make this memory indelible. She reflected on the surreal nature of moments like these, how life could shift from ordinary to extraordinary in a heartbeat. 1 minute, she was a mere observer, drifting through the world unnoticed. The next, she was part of a story that seemed too cinematic to be real. She felt a warmth inside her chest, a glow that was not just emotional but spiritual, a sensation that whispered of possibilities, of chance encounters and fleeting glories that could lift a heart higher than the tallest mountain or the widest sky. Her thoughts wandered to what she would do with this memory. Would she tell anyone, or would she keep it tucked away like a precious gem, revisiting it silently in moments of doubt or weariness? She imagined recounting it to friends, but the words would never capture the true depth, the way her chest had tightened in excitement, how the air itself had seemed to hum in harmony with her heartbeat. She thought of her life before this flight, of the routines and small anxieties, and realized that while they were real, they were temporary, mutable. The salute had reminded her that life, even in its most mundane stretches, could surprise, could lift her out of herself, could gift her moments that felt larger than existence itself. She leaned back further in her seat, letting the vibration of the engine soothe her nerves, and allowed her mind to wander. She pictured the fighter jet slicing through the sky at impossible speeds, the pilot's hands steady on the controls, eyes sharp, mind focused yet calm. She imagined the ground below, a distant quilt of landscapes, unaware of the airborne choreography above it. The jet had been a symbol, she realized, a symbol of bravery, of precision, of grace, and of the boundless potential of the human spirit. It was not just a machine, it was an extension of the pilot's will, a testament to what could be achieved when skill met courage. And somehow, she had been a part of it, if only for a heartbeat, a single instant frozen in time. As the airplane continued its journey, she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sensation of the salute seep into her, filling her with a quiet reverence. She felt lighter, as though the moment had lifted a weight from her shoulders, a reminder that wonder could exist anywhere, in a book, a smile, or even a gesture midair from a stranger who would never know the impact of his simple action. She marveled at the smallness of her life in the grand scheme of the universe, yet simultaneously at the enormity of the experience she had just witnessed. It was humbling and exhilarating all at once, a paradox she would carry with her for the rest of her days. Hours later, when the airplane touched down and the city lights flickered into view through the windows, she felt a bittersweet pang. The world below was real, tangible, and yet somehow diminished after the vast expanse of sky and the extraordinary encounter she had just experienced. The ordinary seemed smaller, less significant, yet richer in contrast to the fleeting brush with the extraordinary she had been granted. She knew that even as she returned to the routines of life, the memory of the salute would remain a beacon, a tiny flame of wonder that could be called upon in moments of doubt, a reminder that magic is always possible, even at 30,000 feet. She stepped off the plane, suitcase in hand, blending into the crowd of travelers, each absorbed in their own worlds. But inside her, the sky still stretched endlessly, and the echo of the salute lingered like a song in her chest. It was a memory that needed no words, a story she would never fully share, yet one that would shape her perspective, her understanding of possibility, and her belief in the beauty of the unexpected. She smiled again, softly, knowing that the universe had winked at her, had offered a rare, luminous gift that was hers and hers alone, a reminder that life, no matter how ordinary it may seem, always has the power to surprise, to thrill, and to lift the soul. And in that soft smile, in that quiet reverence, she carried the sky with her, the jet with its salute, and the unspoken promise that magic could happen anywhere, to anyone, at any time, even to a girl in seat 16A. The memory was no longer just a memory, it was a part of her, etched into the contours of her heart, a radiant truth she would cherish, a whisper of wonder she would follow wherever life's paths might take her, forever